don't know wetin you be, leave me alone.
He married beauty, but woke up a curse. This is not love. This is the river's bride.
Please. Spare my life. I swore an oath to love you, but I did not know what you truly were. Those were the desperate, breathless cries of Obinna as he backed away into the freezing swamp. But the beautiful girl he had married just hours before was no longer standing on two legs. From the waist down, her body was a thick, muscular coil of shimmering emerald scales, wrapping around the ancient trees. She leaned her human face down toward him, her eyes glowing with a cold, golden fire, reminding him that a vow made to a spirit cannot be broken just because the sun has gone down. My people, curiosity and desperation can lead a man to open a door that the elders closed centuries ago. Obinna wanted a perfect wife who asked for no bride price. He did not know he had invited the queen of the river into his bed. Sit down, get comfortable, and listen with your soul. Because this is the story of a beauty that carried venom. In the prosperous village of Otolo, lived a young man named Obinna. He was the finest palm wine tapper in the clan, blessed with a face and strength that made many young maidens lose their breath. But Obinna carried a heavy burden. His father had passed away, leaving behind a mountain of debt, and according to the rigid customs of Otolo, a man could not marry unless he could provide a massive bride price consisting of dozens of yams, expensive livestock, and heavy coral beads for the bride's family. Because Obinna spent every single copper he made paying off his father's debts, he remained unmarried at an age when his peers already had children running around their compounds. The village elders mocked him behind his back, calling him a dry tree that would leave no seeds behind. The rejection and loneliness began to rust his heart. He grew bitter, looking at the wealthy men who married multiple wives simply because their barns were full of yam. Every evening, Obinna would walk deep into the forbidden parts of the forest near the sacred river, sitting on the bank, weeping into the water, wishing with all his might for a woman who would look past his empty pockets and love him for who he was. The spiritual realm always answers a desperate cry, but it never warns you of the terms. One fateful evening, as the moon began to rise over the sacred river, the water stirred without a wind. Out from the thick mist stepped a girl whose beauty was so blinding it seemed to silence the crickets. Her name was Adanna. Her skin was smoother than polished river stone, and her eyes held a depth that made Obinna forget his own name. She walked straight to him, wiped his tears, and told him she had been watching his pure heart from afar. When Obinna confessed that he was too poor to afford a wife, Adanna smiled a soft, mysterious smile. She told him she had no parents, no family, and demanded absolutely no bride price. All she required from him was a single, sacred vow, that he would never ask about her past, and that he would never look at her while she bathed at midnight. Overjoyed and blinded by love, Obinna took her hand and brought her home as his wife. Overnight, Obinna's broken life transformed into a paradise. Adanna was the perfect wife. She swept the compound until it gleamed, her cooking tasted like a feast of the gods, and she treated Obinna like a king. The very village elders who had mocked him were forced to bite their tongues in jealousy, wondering how the poorest tapper had captured the most beautiful woman in the clan. Obinna felt like the luckiest man alive, believing his days of sorrow were buried forever. But my people, a leopard cannot hide its spots for long, and a creature of the water cannot fully adapt to the dry land. As the weeks passed, strange signs began to appear in Obinna's compound. The first red flag was her skin. On particularly hot afternoons, Adanna's skin would become ice cold to the touch, and Obinna once caught a glimpse of glittering, emerald scales on her shoulder that vanished the moment she rubbed them. Furthermore, Adanna never ate food in front of him. She would only cook and watch him eat, claiming she preferred to eat in private. The warnings grew louder when Obinna visited the village market. The old blind herbalist of Otolo, a man who could smell the presence of spirits, grabbed Obinna by his wrapper. The old man began to tremble, whispering frantically that Obinna smelled of old river mud and the cold sweat of a serpent. He begged the young man to look closely at the tracks his wife left in the dust, warning that some feet do not leave human footprints. Obinna pushed the old man away angrily, accusing him of jealousy, but inside his heart, a seed of doubt had been planted. It began to grow, feeding on the memory of the midnight rule his beautiful wife had strictly given him. Curiosity is the key that breaks the lock of protection. On the night of the full moon, the air inside the hut became suffocatingly cold. Obinna woke up at midnight to find Adanna's side of the bed empty. Remembering her strict warning never to watch her bathe, his mind raced with suspicion. He told himself that a husband had the right to know his wife's secrets. Moving like a shadow, Obinna crept to the back of the hut and peeked through a small crack in the wooden window shutters that looked into the washing area. The moonlight was bright and heavy, casting long shadows. What Obinna saw through that crack froze the blood in his veins. Adanna was not standing in the washing tub. Her beautiful human upper body was leaning against the stone wall, but from her waist down, her legs were completely gone. In their place was a massive, 20-foot-long coil of thick, emerald green python scales, sliding and rubbing against the mortar to shed her skin. In his absolute terror, Obinna gasped out loud, accidentally knocking over a clay water pot resting on the windowsill. The pot shattered loudly against the floor. Instantly, the snake girl's head snapped toward the window, her golden eyes looking directly onto his through the crack. Which brings us back to that terrifying chase through the midnight swamp, my people. Obinna fled into the forest, running from the creature he had loved. But you cannot outrun a spirit on its own ground. The massive emerald python glided through the trees with impossible speed, wrapping her heavy, muscular coils around Obinna's legs, pinning him into the mud. As Obinna wept, begging for his life, the serpent did not strike. Instead, the golden light in her eyes softened into human tears. Before his very eyes, the scales began to recede, and she took the form of Adanna once more, looking down at him with a broken heart. She asked him why he could not just trust her love. She told him she had left the river kingdom, giving up her royal spirit position just to offer companionship to a lonely man who cried by the water. She had brought him peace, wealth, and devotion, asking for nothing but his trust in return. But because his eyes were too greedy for secrets, the spell was broken. Adanna let out a final, mournful cry that echoed across the 7 hills of Otolo. She turned around and dove deep into the sacred river, her emerald form vanishing into the dark currents forever. The next morning, Obinna returned to his compound, but the paradise was gone. His fine clothes had turned back into tattered rags, his house was empty, and the village elders once again looked at him with mockery. He had lost the only woman who ever loved him, left with nothing but the haunting memory of the snake girl. My people, the ancestors used Adanna to teach Otolo a lesson that they would never forget, that love does not look at the size of a man's barn, but at the purity of his spirit. Obinna spent the rest of his days sitting by that riverbank, calling her name, but the water never answered him again. How many of us are like Obinna in our world today? How many times have we been blessed with people who love us genuinely, people who protect us and provide peace for our souls, yet we destroy everything because of unnecessary suspicion, broken trust, and the desire to pry into things that do not concern us. We lose good relationships because we are looking for flaws instead of appreciating the peace we have been given. Learn to protect the secrets of those who love you. Value the trust that is placed in your hands, because once the snake girl returns to the water, no amount of tears can bring her back to the land. If the story of the snake girl touched your heart tonight, then you already know this channel is your home. Hit that subscribe button right now, and turn on your notification bell so you never miss our weekly journeys into the deep wisdom of our fathers. Leave me a comment below and tell me, do you blame Obinna for looking through the window, or would you have done the exact same thing? I read and reply to every single comment. Until the next story, stay safe, stay wise, and remember that some doors are kept locked to keep you safe. See you in next one. Bye for now.